Hey there, and welcome to the BLISS Podcast on Sunday evening. This is Chatting with the Hare Krishnas. My name is Maitreya Rsi, and you're probably wondering who this is talking to you right now. But I'm going to give you a little bit about my life story, how I came to Krishna consciousness, what I'm doing now. So I was looking, like many of you probably are, for something spiritual, something a little bit more to life. And I went to school in Montana State University, that's in the United States, for those of you who don't know. And there I was looking for what I wanted to do in life in general. I wanted to originally be a lawyer, but that didn't really work with me. Nothing scholarly it didn't really fit with me so much. So I was stuck there in school, and instead of studying, I instead decided to experiment with drugs, alcohol, like that. So after experimenting with drugs, I had some experiences that made me question who I am and what is life all about. So after that, I started experimenting more in a clean way with yoga and meditation. And after some time experimenting with yoga and meditation, I was following some YouTube channels. And I don't know if some of you know, I was following a particular YouTuber called Koi Fresco. And Koi Fresco, he makes videos about spiritual life, the kind of base ABCs of spiritual life. And part of his deal is that at the time he was making a package for people, kind of like a gift box that you could order online. And this package had the essentials of spiritual life. You had like a mala in there, incense, necklaces, some books, very basic. And so I ordered one of these packages, and I remember the first and only package I ever bought had in there a nice copy of a pamphlet by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada called Krishna, the Reservoir of All Pleasure. And just the cover of the pamphlet was very appealing to me. I kind of threw aside the mala and the incense. I wasn't so interested in those. But this pamphlet really caught my attention, and I started reading through it. The pictures are very attractive, the philosophy was very attractive, and I saw that the Maha Mantra. And for those of you who don't know, the Maha Mantra is Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This is how we connect to Krishna, to God. And at the time, that was kind of what I was looking for. I was looking for a way how to connect to the truth. And I was also had been messing around with Buddhist philosophy specifically, and it didn't really click with me. I thought I was more of I thought there was something more like a theistic aspect to the truth. I wasn't so much into this voidist philosophy. So when I encountered Krishna consciousness in this way in the Maha Mantra, and I started chanting, I immediately felt a connection. I felt like an effect that I hadn't felt with any of these other meditative processes. So I was immediately very attracted because this Maha Mantra is advertised as connecting to the reservoir of pleasure, and then upon chanting that mantra, I felt transcendental pleasure. So I was taken aback that this is something very practical, something real. So immediately I wanted to learn more, and I was looking online, YouTube and Instagram, everything, just to do some more research on Krishna consciousness. Like, what is it? Who are the people? What are they like? And I found a YouTuber there called Ramachandra Das. And Ramachandra, he's also known on YouTube. Some of you may know him. He's kind of popular there. He's got something like 40,000 subscribers now. But he's called The Living Monk on YouTube. And he describes Krishna consciousness there. He does videos about his preaching efforts, his chanting. And I remember watching one of his introduction videos on what is Krishna consciousness. And he mentioned there that he was a monk, and I could tell that he was knowledgeable. So I contacted him on his YouTube account, and I emailed him. And we were going back and forth. I told him that I was also interested in monastic life, and that this particular philosophy really struck me. So we were going back and forth on Skype, and he was connected to an organization called BLISS. And BLISS is like an association of devotees, people who are practicing this Krishna consciousness. And they work together to understand what is Krishna consciousness, who is Krishna. They work together to connect to the absolute truth. And so this was very interesting to me. And I was watching their YouTube videos also. And their Maitreya Rsi and Purujit Dasa were giving classes. And these classes were also elaborating on the philosophy. And it became deeper and deeper, more interesting to me. So in this way, I wanted to connect with the bliss. So I reached out to those Prabhus. Prabhu means like a master. It's a way of referring to someone who you associate with in this particular yoga practice. So I reached out to these Prabhus there, and I wanted to find out how I could associate with them more. So in this way, I came in contact with Krishna consciousness, and pretty much as soon as I started practicing, I also felt a connection, like an intimate connection with the spiritual master, His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. And I could feel that even though I was just listening to lectures by Prabhupada on YouTube, he was connecting to me. Like it wasn't so much that I would make a connection in my mind, oh, that answers a question that I had. It was a question I had deep in my heart, and then it was almost as if Prabhupada was directly speaking to me. He would answer it in such a way that it really struck me. It made me emotional multiple times. And then new questions would come up, and he would answer these questions. So in this way, I understood that Prabhupada, even though he's not physically present, he is there with me. So this was also another very striking thing. And this all happened in a short period of time. I was quite overwhelmed by how real this philosophy is. And so yeah, in this way I was very inspired, and now I'm working in association with Bliss under the direction of our spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada. So that's a little bit about my background. Now, what am I doing now? I decided that it would be a cool idea to have a podcast about this cool philosophy. And I'm here now with Purujit Prabhu, Purujit Dasa, and he's been practicing Krishna consciousness for over 15 years. He's been preaching in Montreal, in Slovakia, in Spain, Fuengirola, and he's been a huge influence on my spiritual life. He's trained me up. He's trained up many devotees. He's writing books on Krishna consciousness. He already has written books on Krishna consciousness. And he's currently compiling Srila Prabhupada's biography. So I'm very excited to introduce His Grace Purujit Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. How are you, Prabhu?
I'm feeling pretty well. How about yourself, Prabhu?
I have a little gong here.
I can tell. It's very nice, resounding.
So each time someone comes, we can put a gong.
Okay. What if they're not a monk?
Now we can put something else.
Okay.
Yes, so Hare Krishna. Yes.
I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your story also, how you came to Krishna consciousness.
Okay. My father was a philosophy teacher in school, and he would keep all kinds of books at home, like Nietzsche and Dalai Lama and all kinds of philosophers. So the Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, was in our house for a long time since I was a child. So in my teenage years, when I started questioning the world and the society and my life, I started reading it, and the first thing that I bump into in Srila Prabhupada's writings was the Maha Mantra. So I started chanting the Maha Mantra regularly while going to school and from school, and each time I had some free time, I would walk somewhere, I would chant. So that's how I came in contact. And same, just like you were saying, I had a very similar experience with Srila Prabhupada. That when I was reading his books, it felt that he was talking to me, like personally to me and no one else. Krishna also, he has this pastime with the gopis, that he's dancing with the gopis, and each gopi is thinking that Krishna is dancing with her and her only. So similarly with the spiritual master, it is kind of like that. So yeah, then of course I met devotees and I got trained more strictly in the practice, and then started, preaching and like that.
Okay, wow, cool. So what was your thinking behind creating BLISS? And if we can maybe just do a little elaboration, what does BLISS stand for?
Okay, BLISS is a short form for Bhaktivedanta Lives in Sound Society. And Bhaktivedanta is the title given to our spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada. Bhakti means devotion. You have different types of yoga. People might be familiar with the Ashtanga or Hatha Yoga, where you practice different asanas and different postures. So there's also a yoga called Bhakti Yoga. And Bhakti, the word Bhakti means devotion. So Bhakti Vedanta is someone who is an expert in the knowledge of devotion. It is not a sentimental process, Krishna consciousness. So our spiritual master has been awarded by the Vaishnava Association this title, Bhakti Vedanta. And Bhakti Vedanta Lives in Sound is the description of this phenomenon we spoke about just now. That when you hear from Srila Prabhupada, when you read his books, you can perceive him personally, as though he was present physically. He's guiding you specifically on a very personal level through his writings. So the society is meant to connect devotees who want to reciprocate with Srila Prabhupada and expand this Krishna consciousness movement under his guidance. So
You would say that's the mission. That's the mission.
That's the mission.
BLISS.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Okay. And what's the purpose of this podcast? Would you say, from your perspective?
Well, that we didn't really specify, right?
Yeah.
We said that we're gonna just press a recording button and we're gonna just brainstorm what the podcast can be about.
Okay.
Of course, we should make it a regular. We should make a regular commitment to this podcasting, and I would say that we should talk about Krishna, and not in a kind of like a formal way, but more informal way, so people can also feel included, that they can also make Krishna consciousness available to everyone.
Our thinking is that when we're out on the street, for those, maybe you've seen us, the Hare Krishnas, on the street distributing Srila Prabhupada's literature or chanting the Maha Mantra, but we're on the street and we're preaching, we have kind of a way, at least I do, a set way of preaching, kind of what we say as like a standard for people on the street. And very rarely do people get to actually hear how nectarian and deep topics about Krishna are. And when devotees talk, these talks are very like spiritually enlivening, stuff you would never hear on the street. So we thought maybe to talk about Krishna in a way that we usually would and put it on a podcast so that all you listeners can hear. But we're going to take a little break and we are going to get back to you after that. Stay tuned. And we're back. So let me know how you're doing at home. We have many social media outlets you can contact us on. We're on YouTube as Kick on the Face. We're on Instagram as the Bliss.
Oh, that's I can't restore that account.
Okay, so that account's no longer valid. We're gonna have another official account coming soon. You can contact me as Maitreya Rsi Dasa on Instagram. That's MAITREYA _ RSI _ DASA. And we're also on Twitter as the same. And you can contact us also by email. What email can we use, Prabhu?
krishnabliss@outlook.com.
Okay. Krishna Bliss. Is that Krishna with a I or KR?
KRSNA.
KRSNA. Okay.
Yeah.
So feel free to reach out to us on social media. We'd love to hear your questions and your comments, your feedback on this podcast. This whole, especially this first episode, is just us going to be discussing what this podcast is actually going to be about. So, especially for this episode.
Could be about.
It's very experimental, off the head. So we're just looking for people's feedback, and we're trying to get a feel about who our receptive audience is. So
that's a good question. Like, who is the audience actually? What do you think?
Well, I think that everyone needs Krishna consciousness. So if I could say everyone and cast a wide net, that's what I would do. But at the same time, not everyone is receptive to Krishna consciousness. So
right.
I think I'm aiming in a way so that we can present Krishna consciousness as it is for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So how to do that is...
Well, we have many friends who are already fans of Bliss on Facebook and so on. Many friends, they support us also financially. We have friends in pretty much all around the world. In India, we have many fans, thousands of fans. In the States, in Europe. So many of these people will probably listen.
Okay.
And there might be some random people who just click randomly. It's kind of difficult to assess. When I was in school, we had this class about advertisement, and they were saying that the companies, big companies like Coca-Cola and so on, they spend tremendous amount of money doing research. Who is actually the customer? What is his lifestyle all about? They would even pay a whole family so they can spy on them for a certain period of time and research exactly what they buy and so on. So they would pay off many of these families and they would do this research.
Wow.
So in this way they can exactly match the tastes of the people, right? So that's why of course we're not trying to be like a Coca-Cola to sell some product or whatever, but in one sense it's important for the so that we match our audience, so that someone clicks on the link, that he gets something that he likes.
Right.
The problem is that Krishna consciousness is cannot be the message cannot be changed. So it's a sort of like a challenge to strike the balance between these two, to communicate with the audience, with people, and explain it in the way that they can relate to, they can understand, and at the same time not to adulterate the philosophy, not to divert the attention.
Well, before we get too deep into
Yeah.
presenting Krishna consciousness, maybe we should establish more deeply and more clearly who actually is Krishna and what is consciousness of Krishna. What is Krishna consciousness actually?
Well, Krishna is God, but I personally don't like this word God. For me, the word God is very scary almost. You know, God as the controller, God as the punisher. You see this sometimes this depiction of God as the eye and the triangle. So it's an eye. Whenever you're having a good time, the eye is there to make you guilty. You know, these are my impressions of the Word of God. So I can't really say that Krishna really matches the description of God as it is generally understood. In the Vedic scriptures, God is considered to be the supreme enjoyer. This is a kind of a new information that God actually is enjoy. He likes to enjoy, just like you like to enjoy. People like to enjoy. They like to enjoy simple activities, for example, sex, drugs, rock and roll, whatever. I don't know if they still say that, sex, drugs, and rock and roll nowadays. So that's what people like. Of course, this is degrading pleasure, but the idea of seeking pleasure is something very intrinsic about human nature, or nature of all living entities, not just humans. So when you say the supreme enjoyer, he is the person who is having the most pleasure, the most fun. The word Krishna means all attractive, the most attractive also, you can say. So when Srila Prabhupada came with these ancient scriptures to the West, the Krishna consciousness movement is not like a newly manufactured cult or something like people tend to think. It is based on the most ancient scriptures in the world, the Vedas. So when Srila Prabhupada came to set up the Krishna consciousness movement in the West, he brought all these new concepts, that God is the enjoyer, God is beautiful, God likes to enjoy, God likes to have fun, God likes to crack jokes. That is Krishna. And furthermore, God has a form. God has a specific form, beautiful form. There's a picture of God we can get from the Vedic scriptures. You might have seen the picture of Krishna. He has a blue skin. He plays a flute. He has a blackish hair. He has a beautiful eyes, lotus-like eyes. He has a yellow dhoti, which is the Vedic dress. Devotees are also wearing this dress, like that. So, and he's wearing a garland, flower garland. So these are all very new things, especially to the Western world. God can speak, God can talk, God can dance, God can love, God can enjoy. So so this is Krishna.
And so, why would you say that people need to know about Krishna? Because I mean, okay, there's the information about Krishna, and that's very nice, but why are we talking about Krishna at all, actually? There are so many podcasts out there, there are so many ideas of God. I mean, this idea is nice, but why should people know about Krishna specifically?
Well, if you look from the historical point of view, that's always the question, the big question. What is beyond this universe? Who created all of this? Is it created? Is there God? Is there no God? And there's so many religions. So we should first of all ask, before we answer this question, we should first of all ask why people are asking these questions. If everything is just matter and our life is simply some combination of chemicals, why there's so much dedicated to the topic of God in the history of mankind? Even the atheist, they also speak of God quite a lot. They might not accept the existence of God, but why they're so much obsessed with denying God? So this we should first of all ask. Why there's so much interest in the question of God? Okay, you can deny, you can say, I don't believe in God, I don't care for God, and so on. But it is a fundamental question. Is there a God? Is there no God? Unless we inquire about this question, then we're not exactly we should not consider ourselves to be men of knowledge, because as soon as you speak of knowledge or science, it is progressive, right? You asking, how does this computer work? It works like this. Okay, so then how do I construct the computer? How do I get this ingredient? What is this mechanical part? How is it made? The questioning is the essential element for knowing, for acquiring knowledge. You must have questioning. So in the Vedic terms, it's called Athato Brahma Jigyasa, the inquiry about the absolute. That is the fundamental question. If you want to deny that question, if you want to pretend that it doesn't exist, then you're not really a knowledgeable person, and nobody will say, oh, I'm a fool. No one will say I am. Everyone wants to know, so it might be a frustration, or it might be a fear, but that question is there whether you acknowledge it or not. So that should be first of all established, that it is important to discuss God, or the supreme cause of everything. The society is so materialistic, especially nowadays. Everyone is thinking of money, and how to enjoy on the bodily plane, and people are giving up spiritual values and human values. So naturally, the tendency is to ignore the topic of God, and so on. But we can see that every human being, every living entity, as I said before, is hankering for these three things: knowledge, eternity. Nobody wants to die. Everyone wants to live forever. Everyone wants to establish eternal relationship. And everyone wants to be happy or blissful. So people might not identify this as God or Krishna. But when we speak of Krishna, it is the fulfillment of all these three aspects in their entirety. That is Krishna, Sat Chit Ananda. Unlimited eternity, unlimited knowledge, unlimited blissfulness. So people might not know exactly that they're looking for Krishna, but by the symptom of the society, we can see that everyone is looking for the fulfillment of eternity, knowledge, and blissfulness. So the question is how to get these things, how to attain these aspects in a sure, scientific, and effective way. So that is Krishna consciousness. That is what we're offering, this ancient science.
Okay. So you also mentioned a while ago Srila Prabhupada, and I also think maybe it's important that we get a little background on our spiritual master who brought us this nice philosophy. I mean, Srila Prabhupada is the reason that this podcast is even going on right now.
Yes.
So maybe we should, for the viewers' sake, we should establish who our spiritual master actually is.
Srila Prabhupada is a self-realized soul who is coming in this ancient disciplic succession of spiritual masters through which the knowledge of Krishna is passed down since time immemorial. So Srila Prabhupada appeared in this world in India in 1896, and he fulfilled the prophecy of the ancient scriptures, especially the prediction made by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is actually incarnation of Krishna. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu predicted that this movement will be spread in every town and every village around the world. So Srila Prabhupada has fulfilled this prophecy. He has come on the order of his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, to the Western world, to New York, United States, at the time of the hippie era, and he has established what is called the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, a big organization, what is called a Hare Krishna organization movement. So this created a huge revolution in the Western world. It brought even people who have not become dedicated devotees, they are also influenced, just like, for example, the Beatles, the famous band from the 60s, very influential band. George Harrison, one of the members, he became influenced by this movement and he started practicing the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra chanting. The vegetarian movements have been very much, I would say, inspired by the Hare Krishna movement. The yoga, the fashion of yoga has become more prominent after Srila Prabhupada established the organization. So it might not be so well recognized, the influence, but we can see clearly that the influence is there. So Srila Prabhupada created a revolution, and what is most valuable is that he has translated these ancient Vedic scriptures such as Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. He has translated over 80 volumes of these different Vedic scriptures. So for the first time, the Western people have access to the Vedic philosophy as it is. There have been many yogis and gurus and who have brought or who attempted to explain the Vedic philosophy to the Western people, but they have, because they're not coming from the authorized succession, they've given their imperfect interpretation, and that's why it never really caught on. There was Swami Vivekananda, for example, or others, all kinds of swamis and yogis. Some of them sincere, some of them purely motivated to get money. Because Srila Prabhupada is empowered by following the exact process as handed to him by his spiritual master, it became successful. And Srila Prabhupada is, as we said, he's present in his books and he's still inspiring many people to take up the process of Krishna consciousness even now when he's not physically present anymore. So, of course, more can be said about Srila Prabhupada, but just to give a little introduction, I would highly recommend that people check out his classes on YouTube, his videos, or hear his classes on the Bhagavad Gita. Or if you cannot pick up the accent, because Prabhupada has a specific transcendental accent, then read some of his books. We have some books on our website, harekrishnablis.com. So you can just have a read and try to make a connection with Srila Prabhupada directly.
Okay, thank you. So that's a nice background on this lovely philosophy, this movement of Krishna consciousness. And now maybe we can get a bit more into the podcast itself.
Yes.
So I was doing some research, and I myself liked podcasts, radio shows.
Right.
And so I had some ideas about, based on what these kind of podcasts and these shows do. There's different kinds of podcasts, but a popular aspect of podcasts is that there's often interviews. And I was wondering what you thought about bringing people on the show, whether that be in person or through calling, or who do you think we would bring on the show? Like who would we approach, do you think, if we were to do such a thing?
I think it's a good idea, makes it more lively, but we have to be a little careful because some people, they take that as an invitation, so they can also preach their own philosophy. This is kind of a controversial, that actually the Vedas, they teach the absolute truth. So the word absolute can be understood in two ways. Like for example, you have an absolutist ruler, someone like a dictator, and you have to follow him absolutely. Like this North Korean dictator.
Kim Jong-un.
Kim Jong, yeah. That's one definition. But then you have another definition of the absolute as all-including. You see? So this Krishna consciousness philosophy is non-sectarian. It is non-sectarian. It is not that we think that Krishna, that someone or ourselves are better than everyone else, or our philosophy is better than everyone else's. No, it is all-inclusive. But because people do not accept that, or do not make the effort to understand, they think it is also sectarian. So, but in actuality, those who avoid this philosophy, they're sectarian. They have a limited point of view. And allowing such persons to give their opinion is kind of like supporting someone who is dogmatic. Like, of course, there's a freedom of speech. We should allow everyone to speak, and everyone should be allowed to discuss, and so on and so on. That is there. But sometimes you have a kind of like an extremist group who, what they call they call it a hate speech. They use a hate speech. So there are restrictions, right, on the internet. You know very well. There are some restrictions. You can't just say that, oh, the black people, they should die, or or the Jews, they should be killed, or you can't say things like this. Although there's freedom of speech, those viewpoints that are oppressing the freedom of speech, they should not be given opportunity. So in the same way, we can discuss Krishna consciousness, but we don't want to divert to other philosophies, especially if these philosophies are incomplete. You see? So, does it make sense?
I follow. So
yeah.
Instead, maybe we could do we could ask the viewers if they have questions pertaining to Krishna consciousness, and then instead we could do like a questions and answers section of the podcast, and that could be a substitute for the interview.
Or we can have a confrontation with some person who might have some how do you say reservations about our philosophy.
Clearing up misconceptions.
Yeah, we're not like shying away from a debate. We can have a debate also, but I think this podcast should be more less confrontational. I think that's my idea. I mean, you might have a different idea, but I would say that we're missing this non-confrontational discussion, like a peaceful discussion where you can open your mind and just speak and get some encouragement in your Krishna conscious practice. So it should be open to new people. They can come and ask questions, but the confrontational atmosphere, we can direct them to some other aspect of the bliss preaching, because we also have that. We have the classes, for example, we are posting on YouTube and Facebook and so on, and anyone can come and challenge, and we can debate. I think this podcast should be more oriented to focus on the Krishna conscious and the practice of Krishna consciousness for those who are seriously interested in the topics.
Okay.
No?
So it's more approachable in that way.
Yeah.
Okay. More of a warm atmosphere.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I guess there's so many of these other philosophies also, like when you see, for example, I don't know, on YouTube or whatever, they're like more confrontation, there's more debates.
Right.
It's more about debates. But Krishna, one of the nice aspects, at least for me, about Krishna consciousness is that it's such a nice, ever expanding the understanding of philosophy that you can just talk about it in this way, and that's very attractive. You don't have to debate it or present it in like a formatted way or threaten people that you're going to go to hell. It's attractive by its own
by
merit.
itself. Yeah, and even Krishna says tusyanti charamanti cha, that when devotees meet together, they enlighten one another about me, and they derive great bliss and satisfaction from this activity. So sometimes when we discuss with devotees, you have two types of discussion. You have like a debate when it's confrontational, and one person establishes some conclusion and then the other one is trying to smash it, right? So it's kind of like a destructive sort of discussion. But then you have a different type of discussion that is productive, that we're building up, we're learning together, we're building up the conclusion together, right? We can even like question our conclusions about Krishna consciousness, that is allowed, but with the idea that we want to understand what is the actual answer to this question.
Not so much that my philosophy trumps your philosophy,
right?
But more that we're all trying to get to the same place here,
right?
And so we should help each other in that.
Yes, I think even Socrates, this is one of the Socrates, that philosopher, Greek philosopher, that's one of his methods he developed, how to lead a philosophical discussion. It's constructive.
Okay.
So,
yeah. Well, speaking of leading up to conclusions, I think we're going to come to an end for this podcast.
Okay.
And then we're going to perhaps do an episode 2, and we're going to elaborate more on what this podcast can be about, what can we do, and please let us know some feedback, your questions, what you think about this first episode. Just again, I'll mention the social media in case you've forgotten it there and you don't want to rewind throughout the podcast. You can contact us on YouTube through the Kick on the Face channel, Kick on the Face.
Can people actually contact us through the YouTube channel? Is there like an email? How does it work?
Well, we can put an email there in the About section, or you can comment on the most recent video. We're going to see that also.
Right.
perhaps a better way, the most direct way would be to email us. What email again can people contact us?
Krishna Bliss, KRSNA Bliss @outlook.com.
Okay, very nice.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So we'll contact you. We'll see you guys next time. Thank you very much for joining this first episode of the Bliss Podcast, Chatting with the Krishnas. Thank you very much
Chatting
for
with
tuning
the
in.
Hare Krishnas, no?
Okay, there you go. Correction. Thank you very much. See you next time.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.